All right, well, thank you so much to everybody who has joined us tonight for our very first live streaming Idaho Trails Association Trailmaster Series presentation. This is a little bit of an experiment as it is our first time, but we're optimistic that it's going to run smoothly. So you all know you're in the right webinar. We will be talking about trail runner resources tonight, when that will be led by Hannah McLean, one of our local ultra runners. Before we get started, I'm going to go ahead and talk just a little bit about the Idaho Trails Association. So typically, I start off these presentations with a little video, but because it's kind of challenging to share a video through a streaming webinar like this, I'm just going to encourage everybody to check out our YouTube channel. And we don't have a lot of videos out there, but we do have some. And also on our YouTube channel, we do have some of our past Trailmaster presentations, so you can go check those out, as well as some of our promotional videos. And then we are recording this presentation, so you will be able to select or pass it on to friends or fellow runners, and just send them to our YouTube channel to get that. And also, as you can see, you can subscribe. And if you subscribe to our YouTube channel, you'll get an automatic email alert when we have new videos that are posted. So go ahead and check that out after this. And then I'll have to confirm this, but I'm pretty sure we should probably have all of the participants' email addresses. And usually after a presentation, I will send out a link to the video and to the PowerPoint presentation, so you can just have that resource. So let's talk a little bit about Idaho trail maintenance. So this is a direct quote from a report that the University of Idaho College of Natural Resources put out just a couple of years ago, basically saying what we already know, that without additional funding for non-motorized trail maintenance in Idaho, our opportunities are likely to decline. And some of you who are out there running probably see some of this already. We're seeing more trails that are falling into disrepair, in some places becoming either impassable, or you have to work around, or the trails are getting lost because we're having less and less money being given to the public agencies like the Forest Service and the BLM for maintaining non-motorized trails, just because there's getting a lack of funding overall. And so, you know, it's up to organizations like the Idaho Trails Association and some of our sister organizations like the Celebrate Bitterroot Frank Church, Youth Conservation Corps, to go out and kind of augment some of that work that's being done using volunteer power. So one thing that is starting this year that's pretty exciting is the Idaho Department of Parks and Recreation is starting a program called the Trail Supporter Program. And this is supposedly rolling out on National Trails Day, which is June 6th. And really what it is a voluntary donation-based initiative to you know, increase the funding available for non-motorized trails. And so it's my understanding that the donations that come in for this will be given out on kind of a almost grant type basis, where different organizations can apply, or that might be one model they do, or it somehow gets divided between the different groups that are doing different projects. And so it sounds like it's the kind of deal where, like, you can see on the right-hand side, I'm not sure if this is going to be the final product they use, but it's a sticker program. And so each year you can renew and get your Trail Supporter sticker. And there is a link to an article about that here at the bottom of this slide, so you can get a little bit more information. I'm assuming there may be some events that are going to be scheduled around the rollout of this program, so stay tuned for more details on that. So, if the Idaho Trails Association before, we're a nonprofit that was founded in 2010 to promote the continued enjoyment of Idaho's hiking trails. And so we do this in a number of ways. One of them is through trail stewardship, in which we go out and do trail maintenance on non-motorized trails throughout the state of Idaho. And we keep up the tradition of using traditional trail maintenance skills, such as crosscut saws, as you can see here in the photo, Pulaski's, McLeod's, and all sorts of different hand tools. We do not use chainsaws for a number of reasons. One of them is it's kind of noisy, and we really, we know our volunteers really enjoy being out in nature and not having to hear a chainsaw all day. And we do a pretty good job of getting through stuff with crosscuts. And of course, people love to use them because they're pretty fun to get on one side of a crosscut. And then education, putting on programs like this to help people learn about the resources that are available to them, not only talking about what trails are available, but educated people on leave no trace ethics, talking about the type of gear that would be appropriate for the recreation you're wanting to do, having folks like Hannah come and talk to specific groups about how to recreate appropriately on our trails. And again, preservation, like we're just an advocate for our public lands and trails throughout the state of Idaho. So give you an idea of how much we've grown. This is our 10th year, and so our 10-year anniversary is kind of a big deal. We were, and well, I guess we are going to be at Tree Fort in September, fingers crossed, and we will be having a trail fort. So keep that in the back of your mind and come and see us if you happen to make it to Tree Fort. And we're hoping to have a few 10-year anniversary celebrations happening throughout the year. Again, when we can all gather again and raise our glasses and have a cheers to all the hard work we've done over the years. And really, as you can see, in 10 years, we've pretty much increased the work we've done tenfold. So that's huge. We're just a teeny nonprofit. We have now very recently, 3 paid staff members and a very active board. My name is Pam Vaughn. I should have said that in the beginning. I am the Idaho Trails Association board member and the organizer for the Trail Master Series presentations. And you'll see here in like 2015, 2016, things really started taking off. And I really would attribute that to our current executive director, Jeff Halligan. He has worked with the Forest Service for many years and was just like huge in helping us build relationships and getting more people on the ground working on trails. So how can you help? So the best thing you can do is become a member. This way you're supporting our cause. And really, to become a member, you donate a little bit of money financially. And so if that's $10, great. If that's $100,000, great. We'll take any of it. And the next best thing you can do is sign up for a trail project. And this year, fingers crossed, we have over 40 projects scheduled to be done. And that ranges from everything from single day kind of family friendly events. These usually happen on National Trails Day, National Public Lands Day, to single day trips, weekend type trips. We have our week-long vacation trips. I say vacation because some of these trips we have a pack string that comes in and brings in a lot of our tools and food and supplies. And so really you just have to pack in what is needed to get you through the week. And a lot of times we also have camp cooks. So at the end of a long, hard day of doing work, you have somebody there waiting with a hot meal for you. And you can sit back and relax and swap stories with everybody. Here, this is going to be our 3rd season of the Women Only Weekends. So if you are a woman or a female identifying person and you would like to come out and try trail maintenance for the very first time, these are amazing trips for that. They're very empowering. The women are so awesome to work with together, and I've seen some lifelong relationships started on those weekends. And then we also have our youth program where we're taking regional youth, the high school age, out on week-long trips. And it's just amazing to see how far these kids come and how much they embrace the work they do and the things they learn in the week that they have been out there. And then also we ask that you just also be an advocate. Advocate for our trail system, advocate for our public lands, treat them appropriately, get out and volunteer. I like to say you're not a public lands owner until you get out and help take care of it. All right, so I'm done with my spiel. And now, fingers crossed, we'll see how this goes. We're gonna turn it over to Hannah, and she's gonna talk about trail running resources. So I am maybe gonna stop sharing here. Or Hannah, can you just start sharing from yours? Here,
yeah, let's see.
Okay. Awesome.
All right. Well, thank you, Pam. Thanks everybody for for tuning in tonight for my presentation on trail running. I'm excited to talk about one of my biggest passions with everyone and to answer some of your questions at the end. So tonight I'll talk about, first thing, what is some of the main differences between road running and trail running. I'll cover some basics on hydration and nutrition. I'll touch on some gear options that are kind of more specific to trail running. We'll go over trail etiquette. And then at the end, cover a few local trail and trail running resources that we have here in Boise. So first off, what are the main differences between trail and the road? Well, the first difference is pretty obvious, is the terrain. The trails aren't as flat or smooth as the road or the sidewalks, although the trails in the foothills do come pretty close. They're usually, full of rocks and roots that might cause you to trip or stumble. Trails like the picture on the right, this one is up on Dry Creek. Some may involve several stream crossings, which sometimes have bridges or rocks you can hop across, and sometimes they don't. Or you can't, like me, hop very well across the rocks and you just end up going through the stream. The trails here are also covered with snow for several months out of the year. And it's actually one of my favorite times to go trail running is when there's about 3 inches of snow on the ground, enough to cover all the rocks and roots, make them nice and smooth, but not enough snow to sink down on. It's really fun. So this new terrain, what does that do to your running? Well, trail miles are gonna be slower than road miles, definitely at first. So take it easy. Trail running will cause you to slow down and pay attention to your path and watch where you step. There are hills that aren't graded for cars, so it's okay to walk them. Hiking is a huge part of trail running, and you're gonna hear me say that a lot. You don't have to run all of the hills. That's when you hike. But my mile pace is anywhere from 2 to 10 minutes slower than my road pace out on the trails, depending on how many hills there are. You'll be using some different muscles in your legs that you might not know that you even had. Trail running activates these small stabilizer muscles in your legs and your ankles that you aren't used to using as frequently in road running. You'll likely be sore at first, but your muscles will eventually get used to running on the uneven ground. Taking smaller steps, running on the trails by shortening your gait allows you to correct yourself more easily if you have a misstep, like when stepping on a rock or a root. The smaller steps also allow you to have more control than huge, long strides, and can prevent you from going downhill too quickly and losing control. The rule of thumb is to focus about 6 feet in front of you so you know what's coming up in a few steps. And sometimes I really have to remind myself not to focus so much on my feet and to look out a little bit ahead so I can be prepared for upcoming obstacles. So I'm going to touch on a few differences in technique related to trail running. And
Hey, Hannah?
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I'm having someone say that they're just seeing your image, not seeing your screen. Are you sharing your, I mean, I can see your screen.
You can see the PowerPoint?
Yep, I can see it. Okay. You keep going and I'll try and work this out on my end.
Okay. Let me know if more people can't see the presentation. Okay, so technique. Uphill. Uphill running involves engaging your butt muscles and leaning forward and using that momentum to propel you uphill. Running uphill will shorten your strides, and you can really swing your arms for more momentum. And when it gets too steep, that's when you switch to power hiking, because trail running involves hiking. And sometimes when it's really steep, I will push down on like the tops of my legs, like on my quads, to use it almost like trekking poles to use that, you know, downward force on my legs to propel me up the hill. And then downhill running. If it's nice and smooth, you can use longer strides, but if it's technical, you'll want to use a lot shorter strides. In general, when you're running downhill, try not to lean back and lay on the brakes. Just relax and relax your quads and let the gravity do some of the work for you. So when it's really steep, you'll want to use short little steps in a high cadence to give you more control. I like to think that I'm running ladder drills to keep my feet nice and quick and light and a high turnover. Downhill running can be really nerve-wracking at first, but as with anything, it gets easier with more practice. Navigation. It's a lot easier to get lost out on the trails, especially when you're in the woods or exploring somewhere new. I've definitely gotten lost in the foothills, not in the woods where you can see the city and generally see where you're going. But the best practice is to carry your phone and or a physical map of the area if it's somewhere new. GPS watches nowadays have backtrack and navigation functions that I've definitely used on a lot of my runs. REI offers some map and compass classes where you can learn how to navigate using just a map and a compass. But for much longer expeditions, I typically bring a physical map with the trails, and I know which trails I want to go on ahead of time. I bring a compass and another GPS device, my Garmin InReach, which comes preloaded with maps in case I need, you know, the map plus the location assistance of a GPS device. The weather. So when you're out trail running, you'll likely be out there longer. And if you're here in Boise, the trails will be a lot more exposed than when you're on the road. We don't have any, we have very few trees out here, so you're more exposed to the elements, including, you know, rain, thunder, and lightning, and the sun. And if you're up in the mountains, the weather can turn around a lot more quickly. So it's important to check the weather. And if you're going out on an evening run, checking sunset details when going out on a run. And this may warrant bringing extra gear, like a rain jacket or a headlamp. If the weather here looks like it's gonna rain, I typically bring a small, lightweight windbreaker so I don't get too cold when it starts raining, and it's enough to keep me dry-ish to finish up my run. Wildlife. We've got rattlesnakes, coyotes, cougars, and cows all in the Boise foothills. As you know, not all snakes are venomous, but they are out there, and you know, it's always good to be cautious around snakes. Both that rattlesnake and those cows I saw out on the Dry Creek Trail, and neither one of them would move off the trail. So what I did is I kept my distance and I tried to shoo them off the trail by raising my voice and clacking my trekking poles together. The cows eventually moved very slowly, but that rattlesnake didn't really care or want to go anywhere. And I didn't want to go around it, so I just turned around and cut my run short, and that's okay. The inevitable. You'll be sore. using those new little stabilizer muscles to keep you balanced on the uneven ground. But with more practice, you'll get stronger and you won't be as sore. And you'll likely fall. You might trip over a root as you're flying downhill or trip over a rock as you're standing still. I've done both on the same run. I ate it running downhill at the start of my run, and later was so busy checking my map, I didn't realize there was a big rock in front of me and then tripped over that. It hurt, but I just had to laugh at myself. But you'll definitely see something awesome out there. And whether that's a sunrise over the foothills or sunset behind the Owyhees, it's going to be great. Hydration and nutrition. These things are pretty personal, so I'm going to cover some generalizations and talk about what works for me, but what works for me might not work for you. So it's just one of those things that you got to try for yourself and see what feels good. But with trail running, it'll likely take you farther out away from home, and you might be gone for longer periods of time. So it's important to bring water and snacks when you know you'll be gone for an extended period, or if it's especially hot, or if you're exploring a new area and can potentially get lost. So hydration before you run. It's always important to drink during the day. And, if I know if I'm going to go out for a long run later in the day, especially during the summer, I'll make sure to drink, a few more glasses of water than I normally would. During your run, it really, is, like I said before, personal and depends on your own sweat rate. But to keep it simple, my rule of thumb is if you plan on going out for more than 90 minutes, it's a safe choice to either bring water or plan your route around a reliable water source. I always bring a lot more water during the summers here, where it can get over 100 degrees and there's really no shade in the lower foothills. If I'm going to be out even more than just an hour, I always bring water. If it's a shorter run, I might plan to hit a few different water fountains. They've got one out by the Learning Center up on 8th Street. But if it's a longer run, I will always bring water with me. And then after your run, if you sweat a lot, it's important to drink in more electrolytes to replace those. And this isn't much different between trail and road running with this, but on the trails there could just be a more exposure factor, and you'll likely be going farther away from reliable water sources. And speaking of reliable water sources, I like to, if I know that I'm going to need water out on the trail, I like to bring this water filter. This one is just the one that I bring. It's a Catadine Be-Free bottle. It's really easy to just fill up, and then as you drink through the mouthpiece, it filters the water. Here in Boise, there are more reliable water sources later in the summer up near Bogus on the East Side Trail and the Mr. Big Trails. There's usually water through August or September up there. And nutrition. Again, this is pretty personal. Everybody's metabolic rate is going to be different, so I'm just going to touch on a few generalizations. Not feeling enough and going out on a trail run could be a quick recipe for feeling bad. Carbohydrates are the best source of energy for exercises like running, but when you start getting out there for long periods, like more than a couple hours, proteins and fats become more important. As a rule of thumb, exercising for more than 90 minutes, you should refuel to keep from crashing and feeling really tired and sick to your stomach. Anywhere from 200 to 500 calories an hour for the rest of your run. Energy gels are an easy thing to stick in your pocket and pack out the trash, but really any carbohydrate will work. It doesn't have to be a fancy packaged treat like the ones shown on the slide. It could be anything like chips or M&Ms or burritos, whatever you like to eat, and you can bring it with you on your run. But running or eating while running is tough. You do have to train your stomach, and it's hard to run and digest food at the same time. I still have, issues with trying to eat enough while running. Now I'm going to talk about some gear that's a little bit more specific to trail running as opposed to road running. But again, the same as with nutrition, this is another aspect of that's very personal, and what fits and works well for one person might not work or fit for someone else. So it's good to just kind of try what you want and see what works for you. So trail shoes. So you'll see there are some road shoes on the left and some trail shoes on the right. The main difference is the trail shoes have kind of a beefier outsole with big lugs that provide traction on various terrain like rocky or muddy terrain. They've got a stiffer midsole and sometimes a lot thicker to prevent sharp rocks and sticks from poking up and poking your feet. And they can also have reinforced uppers to prevent stuff from poking the tops of your feet. And sometimes they have Gore-Tex built in to keep water from stream crossings from getting your feet wet. But trail shoes aren't always necessary. The lower foothills here are really smooth and compact, and you can get by with any running shoe here. I personally like the really cushy trail shoes that kind of feel like you're running on clouds. It's really nice.
Oh.
Next are running packs. There are a variety of different packs, and out on trails, you might be gone for longer and you'll likely be farther away from town, so there's a greater need to bring water and snacks with you, or in the case of getting lost, bringing other gear in case you're out there for longer than you're planning. So the first thing are the vests. So they're like a little running backpack that typically has a compartment in the back for a water bladder or room up front for water bottles. All of the pockets you can fit snacks and your phone and your keys in. I know if I'm going out for longer than an hour, I like to wear my running vest and fill up the water bladder and pockets with snacks. That way I know I'll have enough water and food in case I get lost. I know that I won't have to carry my phone in my hand. I can just put it in my backpack so I can take lots of pictures and use it for navigation. And the easy thing with the running vest is you can pack in extra layers like a light windbreaker if the weather looks like it might be bad. The next thing are handhelds. It's kind of self-explanatory. It's a water bottle that has a hand strap. It usually comes with a pocket. If I'm going out on a shorter run, especially during the summer, I'll just bring this with a little water so I don't get too thirsty. Most of these are made so it's pretty easy to change between hands, so you don't have to run with it in one hand the whole time. And then the other one are hip belts, which are kind of like running fanny packs. As you can see in the picture, they have some water bottles and a little place to store some other stuff in a zippered pocket. And these are usually cinched pretty tight around your waist, so it stays in place while you're running. The next gear is headlamps. And as you might have noticed, there are not many light posts out on the trails. And nowadays they make such a variety of headlamps designed specifically for running with different amounts of lumens or how bright the light is and different battery lives. Some of them they make pretty small, so you can just stash in your pocket if you plan to stay out, past sunset or get out there before sunrise. Sometimes I feel like a headlamp fits better when I'm wearing a hat or a buff around my head, which adds an extra layer of protection between your head and the headlamp. And as with any other gear, the more you run with it, the more you run with your headlamp, you'll learn how tight you like it, you'll learn how to tighten it, and it'll just feel better the more you use it. And you'll get more used to running in the dark with the light, which makes, some weird shadows. And last is GPS. I know I touched on this a little bit earlier with navigation, but there are now lots of GPS watches, a whole spectrum of price points. The GPS watches nowadays usually have a backtrack function, so it tells you where you are and the best way to get back to where you started. And then kind of on the higher end of the price point with GPS devices are different things like an inReach that comes preloaded with maps and usually comes with a data plan, so you can send text messages over satellite, and has an SOS button that you can use in case you really need to be rescued. Running watches, aren't specific to trail running, but the map function and the track back function is really helpful out on the trails in case you get lost. So next I'm going to talk about trail etiquette. First kind of rule is leave no trace. So that means anything you bring out there with you, you should bring it back with you. And that includes garbage, toilet paper, and if you gotta go, dig a cat hole, bury your waste, pack out your toilet paper, please don't burn it. Pam actually gives a separate seminar on pooping in the woods, so if you have questions on that, you can shoot those over to Pam. Staying on trail. So venturing off trail can trample fragile plant life, especially right now in the springtime when the grass is trying to grow on the sides of the trails. You want to make sure to stay on the trail so that grass can grow. Venturing off trail also causes erosion and widening of the trail. The only time I feel like it's responsible to travel off trail is maybe right now to keep your 6-foot distance and to avoid disturbing wildlife that's on the trail and doesn't want to move. Know before you go. So you'll want to investigate trail conditions before you head out. Here in Boise, we have the Ridge to Rivers website, which they post daily updates on trail conditions. It's springtime, so it's raining a lot, or earlier today it was hailing. So you don't want to use the muddy trails because they become really slick and your footprints dry into concrete and really tears up the trails. You also want to investigate if maybe there's snowy conditions. Snowy conditions may still exist on shady trails or north-facing trails. Here in Boise, I have what I like to call a sandy loop trail. Here coming like in the Camel's Back Park. I know all these trails are all weather trails, so you can run on them when it's raining or when all the other trails are muddy. And I know that I won't be causing damage to them by running on them when they're wet. There are also 2 dirt roads here that a lot of trail runners like to use when they want to run hills and all the other trails are muddy. 8th Street and Rocky Canyon. You can get some pretty good elevation gain running up those dirt roads. So you've probably seen these signs on multi-use trails. This sign means that everybody yields to horses. Mountain bikers yield to everyone, and uphill hikers and runners, or downhill hikers and runners yield to uphill hikers and runners. We've got a lot of multi-use trails here in Boise, so it's good to keep this in mind so that everybody can share the trail. And some other etiquette that I like to stick in here. If you're wearing headphones, please keep them to a minimum for your safety and for the safety of other trail runners. You'll be able to hear people who are wanting to pass you, or hear mountain bikers that might be coming up behind you or coming around a bend. And please leave the wildlife alone and give them their space. I was definitely more than willing to give that moose his space. And finally, I'm going to touch on a few local resources for trails that we have here in Boise. As Pam mentioned earlier, the Idaho Trails Association, they organize trail maintenance activities throughout the spring and summer months. And I participated in my first WOW weekend, the women's only weekend. It was my first time doing trail work, and it was really, really fun to meet all these other women and work on improving the trails. And let me tell you, doing trail work will really give you an appreciation for the trails. I mean, we worked all weekend, and I'm not even sure if we did a mile's worth of trail work. And it was hard, but it was really fun. And I encourage you to participate in some trail work. The next is Ridge to Rivers. I know I talked about them briefly earlier, but they manage the foothill trails here in Boise. Their website has this really great interactive trail map that shows all of the different distances of the trails and gives you a kind of a difficulty rating. They also have a smartphone map app that shows you all the trails and then gives you your location on the trail. In the springtime, when the weather is pretty iffy, I always check the Ridge to Rivers website before I go, so I know kind of what the general trail conditions are, so I know where best to run so I don't do any damage to the trails. Yeah, so this time of year, sometimes that involves staying low and flat on the all-weather trails like the Red Fox or Owl's Roost trails and Camel's Back, or the Mountain Cove Trail and Military Reserve. Or sometimes that means turning my runs into an out and back where I get to a section where it's muddy and then I turn around. Ridge to Rivers is really a great resource that's free and is really helpful when you're planning your next run. We also have the Pulse Running Group, which organizes weekly trail runs and puts on several trail races around Idaho. They have a specialty store located in Meridian. They typically organize 2 trail runs a week, one on Wednesday nights, and then a longer run on Saturday mornings. The group splits up into a slower group that does a lot more hiking and running, and then a fast group, which, well, they're pretty speedy and they pretty much run all of the hills. But the Pulse group is really fun and they're really welcoming to new and veteran trail runners. There's also the Wild Idaho Endurance Challenge, which is a self-supported backcountry route series. They post long distance routes, about like 20 to 60 miles, all located in different Idaho wilderness areas. These routes are for trail runners, hikers, and backpackers. You just have to be foot powered to do them. I did a few of these routes over this summer, and they're really fun and they're really challenging. A lot of them involve navigation skills. Wild Idaho will get you exploring places in Idaho where not a lot of people go, like the Frank Church and Gospel Hump areas and the Selway Bitterroot. And they also have some routes in more popular areas like the Sawtooth and White Clouds. You can sign up for these challenges on Ultra Sign Up, but it's not a race. You can choose to do any of these routes at whatever time is best for you. Wild Idaho Endurance also donates all of their profits to the local trail organizations that maintain trails in those areas. And then just a few online map resources. I personally like to use Gaia to map my routes and navigate in areas that I'm unfamiliar with. But I've also used the Trail Run Project and All Trails to check trip reports of the places where I want to go. And Strava Explorer lets you see where everyone else is running around you. And that's Trail Running 101. If you have any questions, I think you can post them and we'll get to them at the end. But now I'm going to pass it back over to Pam to talk about ITA's upcoming trail report resource and let you know how you can volunteer for ITA on your next trail run.
Cool. Thank you so much, Hannah. Some really good information there. So yeah, I think before we get fully swapped over here, so let's see. I'm going to see if anybody has any questions for Hannah. I see a few popping up here. Let's see. All right, so I'm just going to kind of run down the list. So from Eric Oliver, what are your go-to shoes?
My go-to shoes are Brooks Calderas. They have a more minimal drop, so the difference between your heel and your forefoot. These ones are about 4 millimeter, which is pretty close to like a low profile, and they feel pretty cushy to me, and I really like them.
Cool. Okay, let's see. Ross says, thank you so much. This was great. Logan, 2 questions. Tips for making the jump from a 50K to a 50 miler.
There are lots of tips. Personally, when training, I like to do big back-to-back weekends. So on Saturday, I'll run like a double-digit miles, like 20 miles on a Saturday, and then another double-digit miles on a Sunday. And so doing that really gets you moving on tired legs and gets you to recover faster, and really practicing eating while you're running, and not just eating the kind of goo, sugary stuff, but like eating real food. For my long runs, like 20 miles and longer, I like to bring burritos and practice eating those and running on a full stomach.
Okay, and there's another question. When you did the WIEC, did you go solo or with a group? Would you please explain what WIEC is?
Sure, so that's the Wild Idaho Endurance Challenge. I attempted 3 and finished 2 of them. So I did the 7 Devils Loop, and I did that with 1 other person. And then I did the Queens River Loop with 2 other people. And then a friend of mine and I tried to backpack the White Clouds Loop. We didn't quite finish. So I've always gone with at least 1 other person. I haven't tried any of them solo yet.
But there's enough information on the website to get people going on those.
Yeah, so the website has a lot of information. Steven, who runs the Wild Idaho, he posts all of the routes that he's mapped, and he posts kind of directions on how to get there. And then you can download the GPX file on your GPS device to navigate with. And he gives you more information on the closest like ranger stations and maybe some landmarks that you'll see. And I think he just posted a lot more new routes since a lot of the ultras this summer have gotten canceled. So there are a lot more up on the website.
Awesome. Okay, so from Emily, she says, "Hey Hannah, thanks for the great info. Do you have any resources, ointments, etc. that you use for that inevitable soreness?"
I do. I personally like to take Epsom salt baths, and I think that really helps kind of ease the achiness in my joints. I also do yoga really frequently, and I think that getting that stretching in, and it doesn't feel good at the time, but it really gets a lot of that lactic acid out of your muscles. And I also foam roll, and that does kind of the same thing. It's like a deep tissue massage that doesn't feel great, but you feel better after you did it.
Okay. Kayla says, "Will you be attempting the Boise Trail Challenge again this year?"
I will be. So a quick plug, the Boise Trails Challenge is a challenge put on by a mostly mountain biker group, but it's open to trail runners, mountain bikers, and then they also have a division that's trail running and mountain biking. And you have a month to do all of the trails in the foothills, which is about 160 miles, 170 miles, but you end up doing over 200 miles if you complete it. I will be trying it again this year, and I'm pretty focused this summer on doing that.
All right, so I've got a question for you. You mentioned the GPS watch devices. How long do those last? Like, what's the battery life? Is it like a regular watch, or is it like a few hours?
So it really depends. The pricier watches are going to have a longer battery life with the GPS function turned on. My watch, I use a Garmin like 945, and it has a 24-hour battery life with GPS. You can switch GPS functions, so they have, I think, like 2 different settings, and one setting which has a longer battery life, it pings less frequently to the satellite, and I didn't feel like it was very accurate, so I just used the one that pings more frequently. So I think it really depends on your price point. I think between 12 and 36 hours for the watches is the range.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. All right, so that's all the questions we have for now, but if you do have any more, please keep them coming. We'll have a little bit more Q&A just after I'm gonna talk about our trail report stuff. So thank you so much, Hannah. I don't know if any of you know Hannah or spent any time with her. I've spent a little bit of time with Hannah, and let me say, she is an unassuming beast. I talked to this gal, and she tells me these crazy stories about how she missed a big race, so she just went and ran around Camel's Back for hours and hours. And on that wild weekend she went on, she also worked her butt off all weekend, and then she went running. So this gal definitely knows what she's doing. Please hit her up if you have any more questions about trail running. And so now I'm just going to give you a little bit of a sneak peek into so the Idaho Trails Association is working on a trails report function where, let's see if I can pull this up here. We're gonna be asking our community to start submitting trail reports, and it's all voluntary, but obviously it's gonna help us figure out what's happening on the ground, and it's also gonna let our users know what's happening on the ground. And so hopefully this will become a resource where people will submit their observations, but then also come here to see what's happening on the ground before they go out on the trail. And so I'm just going to run through a few slides to give you the gist of it. So really what it comes down to is there's 2 pieces. One of them is just a basic form. As you can see, you just fill out some really basic information. And then we'll ask a series of questions having to do with some more specific things, like, is there water available that you could filter or water your animals? Do you see any sort of falling trees on the trail with some drop downs? You just give some selections here. Rockfall, washouts, overgrown sections, and then we'll give you this overall trip functional text box here will allow you to give any more specific details, so you can give us a whole paragraph of information if you want to. And then also we're allowing you to attach photos or documents. So if you're, you know, want to write up a Word document about your whole experience, more power to you. If you have a GPX file you want to share where maybe you saw a really bad section and you want to mark it for downed trees or a really bad washout or a really big area of rockfall, the more information you get to us, the easier it is for us to know what's happening on the ground. And so we'll know what we're up against when we want to come out there and do some work. And also, this will help us prioritize some of the work we're doing. So, you know, if you want a way to get your voice heard, this is going to be it. We want you to come out here and give us information about the trails that you love. So that information then will be probably put out something like what you're seeing here, kind of a dashboard with an interactive map where you'll see the trail report submitted on the left-hand side with all that information spelled out for you, and then an interactive map on the right-hand side. And there is also going to be like a mobile-friendly version. Really, it's the same deal. It's just kind of split up on in a different way, so it'll work a little bit better on a smaller screen. And so the nice thing is it's a little bit interactive. So for example, if you're scrolling through the list of trails here, if you click on one, it's going to zoom right to that on your map so you can see exactly where it is. And you can also just use the map. If you click a point on the map, it's going to bring up a pop-up box. And in the pop-up box, it's actually going to show you also any pictures that were attached, or if there's like a zipped up GPX file, that's also going to be sitting there. So maybe some more tools in your toolbox for when you're getting ready to go out. And then we've made it so that the different pieces of this dashboard, you can use these sliders to push stuff out of the way. So if you're not really interested in navigating with the sidebar, you can just go right into the map and start scrolling around, move some stuff out of your way. And in this map, so in the upper right-hand corner of the map, there are some tools that allow you to do some basic searching. You can look at the legend, and so we are pulling in information directly from the Idaho Department of Parks and Recreation Trails, and so all of the trail information you see on there is updated by them. And you can turn on and off different base maps, so if you'd rather see satellite imagery, and then turn off layers accordingly. And so that's just a little bit of a sneak peek. Hopefully we're going to have that up here soon. And I'm pretty sure, this isn't 100% finalized, but I'm pretty sure we're going to keep doing this. And next month, hopefully have Carrie Holmes with us to be talking about backcountry cooking. She's a certified health coach, going to help you spice up your backpacking meals. I am always looking for creative ways to step away from the ramen and the tuna packets. So I'm excited to hear from her. So if anybody has any more questions, now is the time. If I'm seeing any pop up here. Let's see here. Okay. All right, we do have one more question here from Joy Luna. Hannah, this is for you. What kind of gear would you recommend for her dog?
You know, I don't have a dog, so I don't really have any gear I could recommend, but it does get really hot out here in the summertime. So the one thing that I would recommend is trying to plan your route around water sources that you know are going to be flowing, so that your dog can drink a lot there and take a dip to cool off.
Yeah, and I don't have a dog either, but I have seen people who have these like paw cover booty things that they put on their paws to help like not wear the pads if they're going on like really big backpacks or trail runs, to help it so that it doesn't wear so bad on their pads. Okay, let's see, we've got a couple more here, got that one. David Hoversland, what races late in the year would you recommend?
Well, this year is kind of tricky, but the Pulse group puts on a few that are later in the year. I think When are they? There's a few that are in September. They have a 50K and a marathon that's in the foothills, and then in October they have called the Bogus 50, and it's a 50-mile race where you start here down in Boise at Fort Boise, and you run all the way up to Bogus, and then you come back down. And that race also has a 50K option and a 15-mile option. And then if you think September is later, if that still counts as later in the year, there is a race up in McCall they have a 100-mile race and a 30K race. And I think the 30K, even though it's shorter, it's still pretty tough. You're up in the mountains. And then Pulse also puts on a race in January called the Wilson Creek Frozen 50K. And I think they might also have a 10-mile option. So that's down in Wilson Creek, which is south of here.
Okay. Anybody else have any last minute questions? Okay, well, first I want to say thank you, Hannah, so much for running through this experiment with us. I think it went well. I think so. And thank you everybody who has tuned in for our first live Trailmaster presentation, and hopefully we'll see you all again next month. Stay safe out there and happy trails.
Yay, thank you.
See you, everybody.